Hello, good morning.
Good morning to you.
I'm situated in Grand Falls, Windsor, and I was involved with a lot of the meetings of government and the final shutdown of the Abitibi Bowater Mill in Grand Falls. And last night, I understand, Fabian Power is the Liberal candidate in the exploits region. And in a debate or whatever on Rogers TV locally, he said to the people that Abitibi Bowater didn't shut the mill in Grand Falls, Newfoundland. That, in fact, the PC government expropriated it. I was terribly upset by it. That's absolutely wrong. Abitibi Bowater had done a whole series of acquisitions, like Stone Consolidated, for an example, acquisition and mergers, trying to become the largest producer of newsprint in the world. They incurred quite a debt in that process, and they got so far in debt, and it got to be so big, that when there was a negative move on the price of newsprint worldwide, it had a bad effect on their financial position to the point they couldn't handle it. They started selling off assets across the country. And the routine was you shut down a mill, you sell the timber assets, and you sell the power assets belonging to that mill to get enough money to not to pay off the debt. Selling the mill wouldn't do that for them, but it might get them enough money to give to the banks so that the banks wouldn't foreclose on them. The last mill that would have happened to would have been Grand Falls, Windsor. The intent of the company at the time was to shut the mill here. We had a wood resource of 500 to 600 cubic meters of wood annually. Every year would yield that. And had a power asset of 14 megs of power. So the intent was to shut the mill and sell off those assets and get money to give to the banks to give them peace and quiet, at least for the time being. And under the original lease, under the king, I think it was in 1803, for those assets, that was granted to them for the purposes, the wording was, for the purposes of producing pulp and paper. The PC government of the day watched this unfold. I had been in on meetings on this, the company was in on meetings on this. The government of the day was, of course, involved. And the government of the day decided, unlike what had happened with 4 or 5 mills in Quebec and several mills in Ontario, where they shut the mill and kept the assets, that the assets should be returned to the province. So the government took the matter to the House of Assembly, and because Abitibi Bowater shut the mill, that was a decision of Abitibi Bowater, not a PC government of any kind, or any kind of government. Because they had made the decision to shut the mill, and did in fact shut production in the mill, the government decided to expropriate all of the assets, and really sort of massive, all of the assets belong to Abitibi Bowater, Grand Falls. The bill, as I understand it, had to go to the House of Assembly. And I think you can probably get your producer to check it out, but I think it went through 3 readings in one day, which is highly unusual. And it required the cooperation of the other 2 parties in order to do that. And I believe the vote to expropriate it was unanimous, which included the NDP and the Liberal Party, for which Mr. Fabian Power is now the candidate. There was no PC government shut the mill in Grand Falls and took all its assets. It was done to keep the assets within the province. I was involved in it to some extent. I attended most of the meetings, and I personally was in favor of it. If they were going to shut the mill, don't let them walk away with the assets. It was as simple as that. And it's not the politics of it. I don't care about the politics of it. The people will vote as they see fit. But in this area, this was a very emotional and very impacting decision. That mill had an annual payroll of $48 million. And it stopped one morning. We had employees in the mill and grandfathers living in 51 communities in Newfoundland. And the impact of Abitibi-Bowater shutting that mill was a big impact. It was very emotional for families. And to now grossly mislead the people on who it was that actually shut that mill, it's just, Paddy, is just so wrong to do at any time, particularly wrong to do at this time. Like I said, the people vote how they want. I don't care. But for a candidate, obviously either doesn't know the facts or has misconstrued the facts so badly. And that I found very disturbing, and I think that needs to be corrected.
Okay, let me hop in for just because it's a fascinating conversation. So I think it's 2008 when we're talking about this, and you're right, got unanimous support in the House of Assembly. So then Premier Williams, Yvonne Jones was the leader of the Liberal Party. Jack Harris, I believe, was the leader of the NDP at the time. And you're right, because at the time, Abitibi-Bowater was trying to figure out as to how they approach servicing that debt to keep the mill open and whether or not there was going to be any contravention of international trade laws, where it gets even more fascinating here. So the legislation at the time expropriated all the hydro assets, which means Star Lake, and all the timber rights to revert to Crown land to be managed by Nalcor at the time. And then lo and behold, every member of the House of Assembly found out the hard way that the expropriation actually violated international trade. The government of Canada had to come to the table, then Prime Minister Harper, with over $100 million to pay an international trade violation fine. So it's wild. You're right. Abitibi closed the mill. Then the province pretty much handcuffed them in full, because if they don't have hydro and they don't have forest rights, then the mill is just a building.
Yeah, that was basically it. I think if I remember back to the time, the legal department with Abitibi-Bowater told them under the original clause where they were granted these rights for the purpose of producing pulp and paper, that if they ceased to produce pulp and paper, then legally, the province could take those assets back. That was the legal argument at the time. I think the company's legal department agreed with that. So you're right. They went to NAFTA. They took another route, and hopefully could win at NAFTA. Whether they would have won or not, we'll never know. What had happened? You're absolutely right. What had happened was Harper was advised not to try that at NAFTA, because the question was, if he won that at NAFTA, what did it do for all other industries within the country that were covered by a NAFTA agreement? So Ottawa paid $130 million to Abitibi-Bowater to get them to back away. And you're absolutely right on that. At the time, if you remember, they took Block 59, which included the mill itself. And there was talks it was $200 million now to clean all of this up and so on. So we went through all of that. None of that happened. They binded a contractor to demolish the mill, and as I understand it, the province got something like 10% of whatever it was that was made. They were over a year trucking out tractor trailers of brass and copper and aluminum and stainless steel. There were mountains of it. I think it all went to Germany for recycling. So the province actually made money on that. Now, left standing there is all the beautiful silviculture forest and a 14-megawatt power project. So what apparently this Liberal candidate is saying is he's going to now try and fight to get these assets back for us. That this PC government has shut down this mill. In essence, the PC government did expropriate the property after the owners shut the mill. The owners had filed for bankruptcy, and under the bankruptcy protection, they didn't have to keep up their obligation to pay severance pay to the 500 or so employees who were still attached to that mill. We had loggers in communities like Bishop Isles, Point Living, Leading Tickle, Dotwood, 51 communities. We had employees. That was a big impact on this province, and $48 million annual payroll, big impact on this province. But anyway, when this government took over, the assets were there, and both parties had said they would make those assets available to any other party who wanted to start up an operation of whatever kind in central Newfoundland. And this Liberal government, when they took it over, started giving away the forest resource portion of it. Absolutely nothing in it for Grand Isles, Dotwood, Bishop Isles, the central area. There's nothing in it. I think I won't get into the exact numbers, try to be wrong, but a lot of the wood is going east at Bloomfield that way. More of the wood is going out of Cornerville. And central Newfoundland wasn't even considered by this Liberal government. They said they put up an expression of a sawmill, for an example, but no one was interested. And that was the only statement I know of made. Well, if you had 500,000 cubic meters of timber, and you had 14 megs of power to try and give away to get someone to build a sawmill, and you couldn't do it, that got to be incompetence of the largest kind. It was never their intention to do it, in my opinion. So now he's talking about, he's going to get all these assets back. I've been pushing the issue in central Newfoundland now for 2 years that the power generation is still here. The water turns into electricity. The electricity goes to St. John's, it turns into money, and nothing comes back. And I have been saying that forever. That power project never cost the province 5 cents. They simply took it, and the federal government paid for it, as you said. And it never cost them 5 cents. That's some consideration. And I said this in a speech I made to the public on Labor Day, and Premier John Hogan stood right in front of me when I made it. He was one of the speakers. And I said, that needs to be revisited. And the communities of Grand Falls, Windsor, Bishop Isles, and Buckas, where the generation is located, should be part of some form of partnership on those power projects, because those communities have benefited from, and that was the basis for them being, for over 100 years. And for Hydro to simply take it and no benefit to communities, I think is a subject that should be looked at. Put it another way, something should happen at the mill in Cornerbrook shut down. I don't think Hydro should just walk in and take the Deer Lake power plant.
No, we're paying like 27 cents for power from Deer Lake's power plant, which is another conversation in and of itself. Ron, I'm really late for the break. Anything else quickly before I do have to go?
No, it's just that very disappointing. These are not misleading. These are grossly misleading statements to people at a critical time in an election. We're 5 or 6 days out of voting, and I'd be very upset with those statements being made to people whose families were affected by this. Just grossly misleading statements, and I think you need to be corrected, and I thank you very much for giving me that opportunity this morning.
I appreciate your time, Ron.